Hey everybody, thanks for joining us again on this SARMLB Podcast. I'm Panda, I'm joined by Bragan again tonight. Bragan, how are you doing this evening?
I'm feeling a little under the weather, but it's good to be back this week, and I'm ready to break down the playoffs.
We are so pumped to bring you episode 2. Like Bragan said, we're going to be breaking down the playoffs. But before we jump into that, we just kind of wanted to reach out and shout out to you guys for listening and giving us some awesome feedback last week. We really appreciate all the love and support and also the good ideas that everyone came with. But one thing we also want to reach out to you guys about is we need a better name for this podcast, a little bit something to make it a little bit more original. And we're also looking for some artwork for it, something that goes along with whatever name. So if you guys have any submissions or ideas, or someone feels like you want to make something for us, that would be awesome. Just message myself, Panda, or Bragan, and we'll be able to hook you up with all the specifics on that. So Bragan, jumping it right into the playoffs right off the bat. It really came down to the wire for several teams, and I think we would be doing an injustice to kind of breeze over that. Because while these teams are looking on to bigger and better things, I think it's important to first realize where they've come from. I guess kind of in your own opinion, what was the last week of the season like, and who really stood out to you?
You know, it really wasn't what we expected it to be. We thought it would go a lot more calmly. We figured the Rays and the Twins would lock up those 2 wild card spots in the AL, and that'd be the end of it. And we knew that the Pirates and Phillies was going to be a battle to the end, and of course that ended up being a 1-game finish in the NL East. Really, it all comes down to the Rays completely choking their number 1 wild card lead and finishing 9 games behind the Twins, 4 games out of the wild card to the Angels, who just got hot at the right time. They closed it out and finished at the number 2 wild card spot above the Red Sox by 1 game. The Pirates just continued to stay steady and keep even with the Phillies while they had that 1-game lead. Just kept going back and forth between 1 and 2 until they finally closed it out. The biggest story here is the Rays completely falling off the map and once again missing the playoffs.
Yeah, I think it was kind of interesting. You and I hit it right on the mark when we picked the Boston Red Sox to make a surge. I don't know about you, but I certainly didn't see them surging quite as much as they did to actually come into the picture. I just thought that they would do better than the Yankees. So that was kind of a surprise to me, just how far and how fast they accelerated and almost snuck in the playoffs there.
Yeah, that's definitely not something we thought would happen, and that ended up going down to the final day too. They just needed a little more help from the Athletics to beat the Angels, and they couldn't get it, but still something they should be proud of. Spassky, I believe, is who's running them right now. Let me look. Yeah, Spassky took over. I think they had a losing record at the time. They were sitting just right above the Blue Jays, which isn't much of an accomplishment. Sorry, Fritz. And I mean, he got them to 94 wins, and every other year, that's probably going to get you into the playoffs. This year, it just didn't go that way. The AL is really tough this year. You got an 86 Yankees team that finished 9 games back. I think this is going to be the standard that the AL is going to be held to for the next several years. You got the Twins, who won 100 games and still finished 5 games behind the White Sox in the Central. You got the Twins, who won 95 games, which will usually win you the division, and they lost out by 13 games to the Astros. So I really think this is the point where the AL really takes off and it becomes the dominant league in the MLB.
So let's go ahead and just start right now with the AL matchup for the wild card. We have the LA Angels are headed over to Minnesota. Going to be playing outside, probably in some colder weather. What's your prediction for this matchup?
Well, this year against the Angels, the Twins had the 4-2 advantage. They're both just about even. They've won 5 of their last 10. The Twins has won 3 straight. The Angels just won their last game against the Athletics. Main thing I'm looking at here, though, is the run differential for the season. And the Twins had a plus 215, while the Angels had a plus 132, which really gives them the clear-cut advantage here, the Twins. I think that they're going to be the team to beat as far as outside of the Orioles. I think the Twins will beat the Angels and give the Orioles a run for their money in the next round.
Yeah, I'm going to pick the Minnesota Twins too, just because when both of us pick one team, the other teams tend to do better. As proof of us picking the Tampa Bay Rays to stick in that top wildcard spot. But no, agreeing with all the stats you pointed out, very even on paper except for that run differential. And I think the best situation for the Angels is that they are even on paper except for that, because one game really can you can throw the run differential out the window for one game versus when you get it into some of these series where it takes a little bit of a clearer picture. So I would pick Minnesota as well to go ahead and win that one, but I think it should still be an interesting game. So if we flip across to the other side, we have the Chicago Cubs are going into Philadelphia to play the Phillies. What are your impressions of this game, and who do you think comes out on top?
I don't see the Cubs standing much of a chance here. They've lost 5 straight. They're playing against arguably the best team in baseball in the Phillies, despite not winning their division. I think the Phillies come out and wipe the floor with them and move on to play division rival Pittsburgh.
Yeah, there's not much to say about it. I agree. It's not going to be much of a game. Philadelphia is just sort of playing it just because, and unfortunately for Philadelphia, as we take a look at the next matchup they have, they're going to end up having to go into Pittsburgh, and probably one of the toughest series to play, and yet they have to play it, in the division. So Philadelphia will win this game pretty handily. Chicago doesn't stand much of a chance, and should be interesting to watch Philadelphia as they continue to progress. So, we've talked about the wild card, but moving into those divisional matchups, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, if Philadelphia does get there, what kind of series do you see sort of taking place between those two teams?
There's no doubt that this one's going to go down to the last game, to the last inning. It's going to go all 5 games in this series, and it's going to come down to that last play of the last game. This year, Pittsburgh had a winning record against the Phillies, just 11-8. I can really see the Phillies, though, breaking out and upsetting the Pirates here. They've got the best offense in history. I mean, the Orioles had the second best offense this year, which would have broken the record for runs scored. And the Phillies took that out by 22 runs. I think their offense is just too much for Carnes and Fires and the rest of their pitching staff on the Pirates, and I think the Phillies are going to take them out in 5 games.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this series if it does in fact happen. And I agree. I think when you get into a series like this, that run differential is so important. It's so key, and a lot of that starts with them scoring the runs that they are. If you take a look at the head-to-head over the 19 games they played, it's still fairly even, with the Pirates actually winning 11 of the 19 games. But I think it'll be a very even series, and I think Philadelphia is really surging at the right time and has all the pieces to win the series. But again, this is probably one of the best series we'll see this offseason, just because of how even the two teams are, how competitive they are. So sticking in the NL, Las Vegas and St. Louis, who do you have?
I got to take the reigning champ Cardinals here. I think that they will beat them 3-1. It won't be much of a contest, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I agree. I don't even think it's going to be remotely close. So we flip over to the AL matchups. We've got our wild card winner. Yay, you won. Now you get to go play Baltimore. Who you got in that series without being biased?
Well, I cannot promise you an unbiased opinion, but I will take the Orioles in a 3-1 smashing of the Minnesota Twins. You know what? Tennis, you and I are pretty good friends, but I'm just ready for the trash talk to start, and I'm just ready to beat the hell out of you and on my way to playing the White Sox or the Astros. So good luck. Not really. That's about it.
And if we take a look at the other series as well, you've got Chicago White Sox going into Houston, like you mentioned. For me, what popped out at me was these teams only played each other 4 times during the regular season. They came out 2-2. Run differential is within +1. Chicago had 255 versus Houston, who had 254. These teams are about as even on paper as you can have them to be. Who are you picking, Chicago or Houston, to come out of this series and hopefully face your Baltimore Orioles?
Well, the thing I'm looking at here is playoff experience for the players. And you've got an Astros team that won 3 straight World Series titles, have made the playoffs every year except for 2019. I got to take the guys that know how to win there, and I think that they'll be the ones that'll come out victorious in a 3-2 game.
Yeah, it certainly will be interesting to see. Definitely a series to keep your eye on and something to consider. I think just for the sake of argument, I'd almost go with the Chicago White Sox. I think while their pitching may not be quite as good on paper, I do like their hitting. And, in a series like this where teams are so even, it can be that extra hit, that extra good at bat that can sort of push the series into your favor. And so I think for me, I'd pick the Chicago White Sox to come out of this series and move on to the League Championship Series. It's kind of gets a little murky here because there's a lot of hypotheticals if this team win, if that team doesn't, but just kind of a very broad overview considering everybody. If you had to pick one team to come out of the American League and one team to come out of the National League, who would those 2 teams be, and then who ultimately do you have winning the World Series?
In the AL, I take my Orioles. Just looking at our 122 wins this season, plus 370 run differential, I think we're definitely the team to beat. In the NL is when it gets a little more interesting, though. I obviously picked the Phillies to beat the Pirates in the Division Series, which would give them the Cardinals, hypothetically speaking. If the Phillies can come out on top in this, I'll take the Phillies all the way against the Orioles in the World Series. On the other hand, if the Cardinals come out on top in the NL, I think the Orioles will be able to take them down. It should be interesting to see how that shapes out and see how all of our hypotheticals come into play.
Yeah, I think at National League side, I'd pick the St. Louis Cardinals just because they have an easier road. Philadelphia does win, then they have to go in and play Pittsburgh and knock off Pittsburgh, and then go and play most likely St. Louis and knock off St. Louis. So it's just one tough game after another. Wild card division, league championship. So I would pick the St. Louis Cardinals coming out of the National League just because they have such an easier path. In American League, I think, again, it's not much of a question right now for the Baltimore Orioles, and I think it'll stay that way for a little bit next season or 2 until they begin to decline. But for this year, I think it's Baltimore's again to lose, and it should be interesting either way to see those 2 together for the World Series.
No, I think the gamblers are not getting as much credit as they deserve. They're in the weakest division this year, but second place team still had 88 wins. They scored, 912 runs, got a great offense, won 8 of their last 10. And they still could get hot, take out the Cardinals. There's no guaranteed lock for any series here. The Orioles could get swept in the first round, or the Cubs could go on and run the table and take out the Phillies, Pirates, and all the way to the World Series. I feel like all these teams are fairly evenly matched, and maybe the little guys here aren't given as much credit as they deserve. And I'm mainly looking at the gamblers. I thought I should bring that to the table.
End of season always brings the end of year awards, the squabbles over who should win them, and I think it's really tough to tell when you get so many stats thrown at you. So we're gonna break this down for everyone and choose our award winners for the end of the year, and just kind of see how they compare with what you guys think. So AL, we'll start in the American League and just work through all of these. But if you had to pick an AL MVP this year, Bragan, who's your AL MVP?
I'd have to give it to last year's MVP, Corey Dickerson. Once again, he led the AL in home runs, at least for the ballot. I think he still ended up leading in home runs. I'm checking. Well, yeah, he led the AL in home runs again, led in RBIs. I don't think there's a whole lot of question here, except for maybe Mookie Betts you could look at, just because he stole 30 bases, had a higher average and on-base percentage, but I got to take the power here, and I got to take my Oriole, Corey Dickerson.
I hate to always copy you, but I agree. I think Corey Dickerson was a good breakout this year, and just continuing to improve upon an already impressive career. I don't think there's much of a discussion here. I think, like you said, if you wanted to pick someone else, it might be Mookie, but 30 stolen bases, while it's great, I don't think it pushes you from runner-up to suddenly needs to be an MVP. I think it still leaves some room for debate there, but I think ultimately Corey Dickerson was the better player this year, and he played on the best team and made the biggest difference. So I think you got to go with Corey Dickerson this year as your AL MVP. Now, if we look at the AL Cy Young, I thought this race was a little bit tougher, but Bragan, care to give us your thoughts on who are you picking this year for your Cy Young?
Well, it really comes down to Clayton Kershaw and Jose Fernandez, and I think as much as some people would like to see Fernandez win it because he's on a lesser team, and obviously what happened to real life Fernandez, you got to go with the better team, and that's Kershaw for the Astros. He had 22 wins this season, tied with Pineda for tops, and that's really one of the biggest reasons that'll put him over the edge here. Yeah,
I think, when I looked at those two, I thought they were very similar, but I'd almost give it to Jose Fernandez, and the reason being, putting all of the real life stuff aside, I think when you look at those stats, it's easy, maybe not, okay, let's clarify this a little bit. It's not easy to do what Clayton Kershaw did. It's not easy to do that. But it's much easier to do that on a team that is winning night in and night out versus a team where maybe the battles are a little bit tougher. Maybe winning doesn't come quite so easy. Maybe where the run support isn't quite there. And yet Jose Fernandez still went out every single night. He still went out and put up a quality game, still had a sub-3 ERA, still had a .88 whip, still got 273 strikeouts. I just think when you look at that, yes, he wasn't on the best team in the league, but he did that on a team that, while it wasn't, it's not a basement dweller, they competed, they just ran into much better competition overall that the roster around him couldn't support. So I would give my nod to Jose Fernandez over Clayton Kershaw, just because if you look at what he did with the roster around him. We can now break down the AL Rookie of the Year. There's only 3 guys on the ballot this year, so should be a fairly easy choice, I would think. I don't know, who's your winner this year? Are any of them worth winning?
On, next question. What do we got in the NL now? There's not even debate here. Let's see what's next. Not even gonna time to listen to this one. I want to hear you make a case for anybody else.
You want to hear me do it? I bet you I could.
I'm sure you could, but you're still gonna lose this battle.
Let's go to the NL. Moving on to the NL MVP. Who's your NL MVP?
I got to give it to Freddie Freeman this year. He had 325. He hit 325, 54 dingers, 119 RBIs. My next up would have been Manny Machado, who just got really hot end of the season and had ridiculous number of doubles, 106 and 147 RBIs. on a better team. Machado, I know I said that before, but this year I think Freeman's the guy.
Yeah, I'd always go with Manny Machado myself personally. I think you can make a case for quite a few of these guys. Maybe even make a case for Mike Trout. Definitely a case there. Machado for me, yeah, sometimes I like the trivial things. 106 doubles. I like that stat. That's a fun stat, and it seems like because of that, he should at least be MVP worthy. I know it's probably not a good reasoning, but I just thought he sort of stood out above everything else and was most valuable because of that. So, good reasoning or not, that's my reasoning. Hopefully he wins with that 106 doubles and those 3 exclamation points afterwards. Should give him some extra points there. So if we move on to the NL Cy Young, again, another super tight race. I thought this one was tighter than the American League. Had a little bit more options. Actually, I thought the National League just had better players in general, but they just seemed to all be stuck on 3 teams. Pittsburgh, St. Louis, and Philadelphia. So picking your Cy Young off of one of those rosters, who is it?
I'm giving it to Carnes. I don't feel like I have to make that much of a case for him. Maybe give it to Waka just because his strikeout numbers. But he had a .78 whip, 191 ERA in 125 games. I don't think there's a whole lot of argument there, but I would like to hear a case for someone else.
Honestly, I can't even BS my way through another case for anyone else. I picked Carnes too. 25-4, a sub 2 ERA, and I think you just stop there. .78 whip, strikeouts are there. How do you even pick somebody else without sounding completely incompetent and stupid? I don't think it's possible. So I agree. Carnes is the guy, and while it's a much better race stat wise, I think there really isn't much competition when you look at who clearly rises above the rest of them. NL Rookie of the Year. I know that AL Rookie was a doozy. Is this one any better in your opinion?
It's not as much about the debate as it is about just looking at the stats of St. Louis's Kevin Brown. He only played 59 games. He hit 289, had an OPS of over 1,000, and you can bleep me out on this, but holy he hit 21 home runs in 59 games. I mean, that's just ridiculous. I can't wait to see what he'll do next season.
Yeah, I think if you made a case for maybe one of the relief pitchers, it would be solely based on he only played 59 games. You know, obviously that was impressive to say the least, stat-wise, but there may be some people kind of on the outside saying, well, he only played 59 games. He only did it for, not even half a season. If you had to look at it from that perspective, I think you would go with one of the 2 relief pitchers. And I actually went with the Las Vegas relief pitcher. I think this is something that Foster Monroe can continue to improve on this type of year, but he had a sub 3 ERA. He had a sub 1 whip. He had 91 strikeouts. So I think it's something that if you wanted to play devil's advocate and say 59 games, not over a longevity of a season, you could maybe make a case for Las Vegas Foster Monroe and say that he could win it. But I agree. I expect a lot of people to see those numbers to hit vote pretty quickly after that and sort of wrap that thing up for Kevin Brown over there in St. Louis.
Yeah, and the biggest thing for me is not just looking at the averages on them as more of the compounded stats and the 21 home runs, 51 RBIs, that kind of thing. He only played 59 games, but he's still going to increase upon those numbers, the compiled stats, as opposed to he could drop here or there in average on base percentage substantially, but even then he's still looking at 40-50 home runs a season.
And with that, we are now going to move on to a new segment that you guys suggested, and we are going to call it Team Takeover. This segment essentially is we are going to take over your team and tell you what you need to do this offseason or immediately to get it turned around and going in the right direction, because something is obviously broken. So tonight we're going to take the bottom 5 teams, or about the bottom 5 teams. We've got Kansas City, San Diego, Toronto, Atlanta, and Washington. So if that's your team, you might want to pay attention, because Panda and Bregan are going to educate you on what you need to start doing. Get this thing turned around. So Bregan, let's go ahead and let's start with the Kansas City Royals over there in the AL Central. What pops out at you about this roster, and give us some thoughts?
The biggest thing that stands out to this poor Royals team is that they have no pitching whatsoever, and not a whole lot of youth there either. I'm just going to go down the list here. We got who to trade, what to sign in the offseason, and player to build around. We're going to start with the who to trade. And right now, I'm looking at reliever Paco Rodriguez. He's 30 years old. He's easily your best pitcher. And at his peak right now, I think you could trade him, get some solid prospects, some draft picks here and there, and really give that team the boost they need. And hopefully trade for some more pitching, some starting pitching, preferably. Player to build around, I got Izzy Radzik. Izzy's really the only guy that you could make a case for here. He's 24 years old. Last year he hit 274, stole 59 bases. I think this is definitely their guy for years to come. They've got him locked up for the next 7 years. I don't see any question that he is the guy going forward.
Well, when I look at this team, I see much of the same. But one guy who stands out to me that needs to go, who needs to be traded ASAP, is Joe Stashak. He's got to go. He's signed to a ridiculous contract. He's not producing. He was a black eye to the team literally mid-season, more like a broken eye. This guy is he's gaining a reputation. He's not improving. He's overpaid at this point in time. He strikes out way too many times. He struck out 159 times in 516 at-bats. And this guy is supposed to be a shortstop. He can barely hit 20 home runs in that same amount of time. So, honestly, 45 RBIs isn't going to cut it for me. I'd dump this guy as quick as you can and try to get some other sorry sap to pay his salary. So that would be my first move if I was the Royals, to sort of help to start cleaning up some of this stuff, because it's just, while he's young and while he has potential and while he has, maybe some ability to improve your team, I think ultimately he's not doing that, and maybe a fresh start will help him. So I would cut that contract. I'd give him another shot somewhere else, and I think I'd free your team of that obligation for the foreseeable future. Plus, when you look at it, he should fetch quite a nice little package if you can kind of pull the wool over someone's eyes. Maybe get some draft picks, maybe get some prospects, and dump that salary for the next, I think it's 6 years. I would do that in a heartbeat. So hopefully Kansas City is able to move some stuff around and get some pitching to help them out in the future.
Fire Przinsky.
Yeah, fire Przinsky. That would be another one.
Listen, La Chupacabra, it's been trending on Twitter for I don't know how long. Ever since he's been hired, it's been trending. You got to check up on this stuff, man. I mean, all the fans, everybody, they want Przinsky out. Fire Przinsky. It needs to happen.
Moving on to a less volatile locker room right now, we've got the San Diego Padres. While it may not be quite as volatile in the forefront of everybody's mind, this team is still in a very sorry state. Bregan, what's your first move this offseason if you're looking over this roster?
Well, the thing about the Padres is, for the last few seasons prior, they've been right in the thick of the playoff race till the end of the season, playing around 500 ball, a little over, and now all of a sudden they just fell off the deep end. When I'm looking at moves to make here, I'd be looking to trade Chris Sale, who just had 19 win-loss record, 4.90 ERA. Not terrible, but he's making $19 million a year until he turns 40 years old, and that's not going to fly. Got to get rid of him. And, you're starting a rebuilding movement right now. And I'd be looking to get rid of Joey Turdislavich. He's a switch hitter on a solid contract for team-wise as far as his production. Just coming off his best season of his career, I'd be looking to trade him, maybe get another younger first baseman. If not, then getting one in the offseason, get some prospects here and there, and really start showing that you're ready to move on from the team that you've got and just start a full rebuild.
Yeah, I think if you're San Diego, the one positive is you have shortstop Levinson, who I would center your team around. I know right now he may not be an exact stud, but he can play anywhere on the field. He's got superstar potential. I think this guy's only got 2 years left on his deal. I think when he's eligible, you lock him up, you pay him the money. And to do that, I think you got to get rid of anybody who's over 28 years old, who's got more than 3 or 4 years left on their deal. I mean, you just can't do it. You can't pay these guys stupid money until they're 40 and they need a walker to get out to the mound or to go play their position. I mean, it's just not going to help your team. Right now I agree. They've got to go into a full rebuild mode, build around Levinson for you, and just cut some of these big contracts that are just going to weigh you down in the future. The one position I think they absolutely need to address this offseason is catcher. You've got 2 young guys trying to play catcher. Neither one of them has a clue what in the world they're doing out there. And while you might want to, let them develop, now is not the time. Go get somebody who can actually play the position, and hopefully that'll help your team going into the next season. But no guarantees there. I think they got a long road ahead of them.
I do kind of want to say something. As far as catcher goes, I kind of like Bill Page. The thing that we do here, SARMLB offseason, if you take out $5 million of cap, then you can give a guy S potential. Right now, he's at a flat potential, and Crafty one, that's who I'd be going after. He's under 800 OPS, which is right where you need to be. Give him that S potential, show a little money for the future, and I think he'll be a star for you. Hold on to Bill Page and do that with him, I think. Or, you could trade him and sign someone else in the offseason, like Panda said. Either way, you'll be doing good for your team, but that is what I would personally do. And right now, I'd be looking at some young starting pitchers. You've got some old guys out there, some guys that are ready to hang it up, some guys that are making too much money, some older guys. I'd be looking to get some younger starting pitchers this offseason through the draft, through trades, through free agency. I mean, just however you got to do it, I'd be looking to get younger at the pitcher position.
Moving on over to the AL now to address one of the poor teams. We're going to take a look at the Toronto Blue Jays. Toronto Blue Jays have had a little bit of a rough season. They have to play Baltimore 19 times a year, which might add to that pain. But Bragan, what are some moves you see Toronto making this offseason?
The thing that amazes me about Toronto is they have such a terrible season-to-season record. When you look at their team and the moves that they've made this year, they have got a great group of young players, especially on the offensive side. What they can do is improve their pitching, and I'd be looking to trade maybe a couple prospects for, mainly Nazir Noel. He was, I think, drafted first round this year. Honestly, not too in the loop with him. But he's one of your top prospects. I think that you can trade him and maybe a couple other guys and get a decent young starting pitcher. And this offseason, free agency, I'd be looking to sign a first baseman. I don't think Sean Snow is your answer at first base. I don't think Eric Hamlin's your answer at first base. I think that you need to go out and find yourself a new first baseman and a couple of decent starting pitchers there. And in the next 2 seasons, you're going to be in the playoffs. You got to, you can build around Elter, Childs, Cologne, Jensen, I mean, even shortstop Wood. You've got great group of young offensive talent there. Hold on to those guys. Don't get rid of them for anything. Stick with what you got there and just target free agency.
Yeah, I think this roster is definitely somewhat there. I agree. I think the first baseman position needs to be addressed this offseason. I think while you'd like to think that Ty Lost could help you, I think he's a little lost as far as what he's doing in the field, and I would ship him out and try to get something a little bit better there, and just kind of improve your team. I mean, this team has a lot of what we might call mid-tier prospects, guys who are sort of right in that middle where, yes, they could help you, but they could also net you quite a return. If you were willing to deal some of them that maybe had okay stats but not great stats, package one or two up and maybe a pick and go get somebody with a great stat. So I would start by addressing the first base position. And then I think, as always, I would address your starting pitching. While it's young, I think there are definitely a couple guys on that rotation who might need to be removed off of it. One of them would be, I would say, you got to find a replacement for Manny Curry. With that A progression and just, 7.7 hits per 9 is okay. But as you can see from this season, he's got a 6.41 ERA this year. He had a 7.21 in 2020. He had an 8.69 in 2019. So, yes, it's coming down. But, I mean, give it 3 more years and maybe it'll actually be, feasible to put in your rotation. So I think you got to make a couple moves there to shore up the rotation, to shore up some of the other stuff going on there. But if they do that and keep those guys, keep those young guys fresh, they should hopefully in a couple years have this thing turned around. One guy I think who maybe they need to look at re-signing would be relief pitcher Roberto Ozuna. He's young. He's probably going to come pretty cheap because his real stats haven't been fantastic. And he can be a centerpiece for your bullpen. How much do you like him, and do you think maybe this is a guy the Blue Jays need to think about keeping around?
Yeah, if there's one guy that they need to hold on to this year, it's Ozuna. Like I said, they need to improve on their pitching, and I think that's a good first step for them. There's really no one else worth re-signing on this team, and you of course want to keep some guys, bring them back, and still have some money to shed in the offseason. But I think this is definitely the guy that you need to look at re-signing first and foremost, and then go out and try to make a splash in free agency.
Moving on to another team that's sort of intriguing for maybe a little bit of a different reason besides the first 3 teams would be the Atlanta Braves. And the reason they're a little bit more interesting is because they have a bunch of expiring contracts coming off the books, 11 total. So as you're kind of looking at this roster, looking at some of the pieces that Atlanta could be losing this next year, is there anybody out of those guys that you're thinking, yeah, Atlanta needs to re-sign this guy?
If I'm Atlanta, I'm not looking to re-sign anybody except for Fernando Cabrera. He's only 18 years old. He's up for the Rookie of the Year award right now. He's on a 1-year, $1 million contract just right now. I say re-sign Cabrera and make him the centerpiece of your future. Maximum number of years I think you can offer is $13 million. I'd go for that right off the bat. Try to lock him up for as long as you possibly can, because this guy is going to be your franchise. He's going to be your team, and you want him to be there when you guys make it big.
Yeah, as I look over this roster, I think, lock him up, and then my next move would be trade Eric Hosmer. I think when you look at this, it again goes back to my rule of thumb that, when you got guys this old making that much money on a rebuilding team, it's time to move them. It's time to go see what you can get for them. Go see if you can get a couple mid-tier, lower-tier prospects, refuel your farm system a little bit. See if you can add maybe a couple picks this offseason to pick your guys to come in. But that would be where I would start. Trade not only Hosmer, but really any guy that's over 30 that's making too much money.
And something that I did when I took over the Orioles just a few seasons ago, and I think that all these teams should definitely look at your guys that are making $5 million or more. If they're not making a huge impact on your team, trade them. Do it. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're trading them for, some F potential prospect with a 500 OPS. Get them off your team and just get to the point where you can have enough cap to completely start over and start on that rebuilding process. Don't let them hang around just for no reason. You want to get those guys off your team, and you want to make that team your own, and you want to make them into winners. So if he's making $5 million or over, you got to seriously look at him and think, is this a guy that I really want on my team for the next X amount of years, with this amount of output? That's just something that I think all these teams that we're going to be discussing, and every team in general, should be looking at.
And with that in mind, we're going to move on over to the Washington Nationals. This will be our last team for the night, but I think there's one name that sort of sticks out like a sore thumb. Who are you sort of saying, yeah, they need to go this offseason?
Man, the guy that they got to get rid of right this second is Max Scherzer. This year, he had 22 losses, posted a 6.14 ERA, and for some reason, they've got him signed for the next 4 years, making $18 million a year. As soon as you get rid of him, and as soon as it happens, you got to start looking for some smaller pieces here. Even if you have to cut the guy, if nobody wants him, cut him. Cut your losses. You'll only have to pay him back, half of his contract over the next, few years, and figure it out from there. But you do not want this guy on your team. He's making you worse, and he's taking up way too much cap room. Get rid of this guy now.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, we've been preaching it the whole time. If you are not a contender, if you are trying to rebuild, the very first thing you should do is look for these guys that are making too much money on too long of a deal and get rid of them. Trade them for something. Go get something for them. And kind of along those lines, Bragan, the question I guess I just want to throw out to you is, Bryce Harper has been a cornerstone for this organization sort of forever since he came up. Is this a guy that you're maybe looking at this offseason as finally being able to be moved, or is he still that cornerstone that you would build around if you were the Washington GM?
Bryce Harper is a guy that needs to stay on your team until he's ready to retire. He is, without a doubt, the face of this franchise and will be for the next 9 years that he's on your team. He's your guy. That's not going to change. You get rid of him, the fans are going to leave, and it's going to be an ugly affair. Keep Bryce Harper, whatever you do. That's your man.
So to put someone with Bryce Harper, is there anyone on this roster who's younger that you would sort of point to and say, okay, while Bryce Harper may be, 28 and sort of hitting his prime now, we can still build around him because we also have these other pieces too. If you had to pick one of those other pieces, who are you pointing to sort of say, watch this guy for the next couple of years and see how he does on this Washington Nationals team?
I really like Southpaw Cole Wagner. You got him locked up for the next 10 years. He's only 18 years old. This year, he was terrible. I'd say you start him out as a long reliever, let him kind of work his way in there, which I found really helps. Just get him some small sample size here and there. He's got 8.2 hits per 9 inning, superstar potential. Give him 5 years, and he's going to be your ace. Hold on to this guy, too. Him and Harper are the only two guys that I would say are untouchable on this team and need to be untouchable on this team.
So this is sort of a spur of the moment question, but if you had one guy, one of these teams, and you had to pick one out of all these five after we've broken them down to maybe in the next year or two, who's going to contend the fastest out of these 5 teams if you had to pick one?
Although they are in a very tough division, I would like to see the Toronto Blue Jays rise up and become a contender. And I think that they are the closest to being that, given the moves that they made this season during the regular season. They got Stuart Elter, and now they've got Candy Jensen starting, Pablo Childs, in the outfield. I think that they are just a few pieces away from being a playoff team.
I think for me, if I had to pick one of those five, I would go with the Washington Nationals. And I think the reason I would go with them is because they at least have a somewhat grasp on the starting pitching. And the other stat I would point out is they did score over 700 runs this year for a team that only had 58 wins. That's still pretty good. That means your offense is at least pointed in the right direction. If you look at a team like Kansas City, oh my goodness, they only scored 585 runs, and then they gave up over 1,000 runs this year for a differential of minus 437. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done there. There's some stuff that can happen, but when you're looking for that team that could turn quickly, again, another tough division that Washington's in, but I would have to say Washington could be that team that could get this thing turned around and going in the right direction. So we'll have to keep our eye on a couple of these teams, see where they go, how they do over the future. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this quick little section breaking down those teams, and you'll have to let us know if you agree or disagree, and if you guys have any strategies that are a little bit different than what we're throwing out there. So to end the night, I think it's only appropriate that we kind of let you guys know what's going on with bbfan, and man, it's kind of weird that he keeps breaking his phone right about playoff time, huh, Bragan?
Yeah, and I really shouldn't be telling you guys this. It's straight confidential between bbfan and the vice commissioners, Panda and I. But we really think that this needs to be exposed right now. He's letting Tom Brady get to his phone again. It happened last year. It happened this year. I think he's just letting old Tommy borrow his phone. It gets smashed. Bad things happen. We really got to be looking out for our commissioner, bbfan, because he's headed down a tough path. He's already trying to promote the deflation of baseballs. I didn't think you could do that, but apparently you can. I think that we're headed down a bumpy road here on SAR, and we really got to look out for that and stick together as owners.
So unfortunately, we do have a misfit commissioner who's hanging out with the wrong crowd. I've also heard rumors that Roger Goodell is a little bit upset that the commissioner of Major League Baseball is hanging out with a known guy that he's not too fond of, and so we'll have to keep you guys updated on this. But the biggest thing is you guys can't go to Twitter over this, because if it just gets out and Cretella gets involved or anything else like that, we're going to be in for a world of hurt. So just keep it off of Twitter, keep it off of social media as much as you can, and just make sure that when bbfan comes back, that just make sure that we keep them in line as a good group of owners that we are.
Oh yeah, we're not even gonna let him listen to this part of the radio segment. We're gonna make a special little podcast for you guys. You guys can hear this, and then we're cutting it out for BB, because it's just a little too much for him to handle right now, and we don't want him to go off the deep end like you guys almost saw with the waiver wire fiasco. So if you guys could just keep this between us, us owners, us pals here, and don't tell bbfan about this. We don't want him to be not trusting anybody now and have him pointing fingers which way, especially at Hal Matthew, who we will be throwing under the bus if this gets out. Remember, everybody. And yeah, let's just try to all be professional about this. And remember, this is not a laughing matter. We're really just trying to protect him here. Thank you.
And with that public service announcement, we are going to wrap up for the night. We hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you guys enjoyed listening again. Just a reminder, if you guys do have any cool names for us or artwork, send them our way, and we'd be more than happy to get something a little bit more original than just the PC logo and a generic podcast name. So we really enjoyed doing this. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and let us know what you thought of the team takeover and everything else. And hopefully you guys will hear this sometime tomorrow before the wildcard games are simmed.
Yeah, music too, guys. We want a main theme song and intro song for us to get pumped up to for this podcast. So if you guys have song suggestions, please keep them PG at least. Maybe PG-13. We'll see. But drop us some song suggestions in the chat box. We'd like to get something that we can all dig on and get funky with it. Have a dandy, peachy old good time. So thanks, guys, for listening again. It's always a pleasure talking with you, Panda. And I think that about wraps it up. So, good luck to everybody that's in the playoffs. And hope you guys all lose to me. And that's all I got to say, especially you, Hal. Still got it out for you.
Well, thanks, everybody, for listening. We hope you guys enjoyed. And we'll see you again next week. Thanks, everybody.